Hey everyone, Rob B here with Rob D, and the gloves are off this week on the Property Podcast. It's episode 259. One of us is going to be battling for the rent side. One of us is going to be battling for the buying side. Yes, it's buying versus renting. Ding ding, let's go.
Yeah, things can get a bit too cozy around here sometimes, so the gloves are going on right now for our main topic this week.
Rob, I'm taking my gloves off. This is a bare knuckle fight.
I didn't realise we were playing Liverpool rules. I'm a bit scared now, actually. So we've got that. We've got two news stories, and assuming that we make it through alive, we've also got two resources of the week as well. So plenty of value packed into our episode this week.
One place you won't be beating each other up, but you may have some interesting, stimulating debates, is the Property Hub meetup. It's tonight, so make sure you get along. There's loads and loads and loads of them. Go to thepropertyhub.net/meetup. And great news, there's even more than before. So we've got new ones in Cambridge, Peterborough, Jersey and Zurich. So growing every single month, it seems. Meetups all over the UK and the rest of the world now. So get along to one. If you haven't been to one already, come on, do it. They're super fun. They're obviously popular. So get along and I'm sure you will not regret it.
And that's not all. Also happening every month is our Discovery webinar, where we tell you a little bit more about the businesses behind the podcast. We don't talk about them on the podcast too much, but we have a half-hour session every month where you can find out a little bit more about what we do behind the scenes and how we might be able to help you. This month, it's Monday, the 5th of March at 6 o'clock. If you'd like to come and join us there, dead easy. Just go to thepropertyhub.net/discover, book your place there.
New story of the week time now, and this is following on from a recent Ask Rob and Rob, where we covered energy performance certificates and the need for them, or the standard they now need to meet in rental properties. This is a really important story, so we wanted to bring it to your attention here on the main podcast. Rob, what's going on?
Yeah, so the new rules around energy performance certificates are now only a month away, coming in April. And this is the requirement that you now need to have at least an E rating on your EPC in order to rent out your property. So if you've already got a tenancy going on, that's fine. But when you come to re-rent it, it needs to have at least an E. So now would be a really good time to dig it out and check. You need to check that it's still in date and check that you've got at least an E rating. If it hasn't, if it's an F or a G, then it's probably going to have some recommendations on there for how to get it up. So you could be thinking about that now. So when you do next have a change of tenancy, you can get that done quickly so you don't have a big void period. And I'm going to sneak in a little bonus news story as well. This is one that won't be coming in anytime soon because it's still just a consultation, but this is around electrical safety. So at the moment in England, you don't need to have an electrical safety certificate. You can choose to have one, and it's a good idea to have one, but it's not mandatory. There's now a consultation about making it mandatory. So you'd probably need to get one renewed every 5 years because that's how it works for HMOs, and I believe that's how it works in Scotland as well. It sounds like yet another thing that you have to do as a landlord, but I think it's probably not a bad idea because at the moment the requirement is already there that you have to have a safe electrical installation. There's just no universally agreed way of proving that you have. So the government is on an absolute mad one at the moment with consultations. There's got to be at least 5 or 6 floating around. It does mean there's likely to be loads of stuff coming our way in the next couple of years, but we will of course keep you updated as we know more.
Right, Rob, to make this extra interesting for our main topic, buying versus renting, we haven't yet decided on who's taking which side. So we'll do the great English tradition of deciding, no, not an arm wrestle, we'll do a coin toss. So, Rob, you go. Heads or tails, what would you like?
Heads all the way. Let's do this.
Oh, sir. Strong start. Looks certainly with you. It's heads. What would you like to do?
Okay, I'm going to take the side of buying. So I'll fly the flag for buying your properties. Rob, you're stuck with renting. Or maybe you're secretly happy. I don't know. You're probably not going to want to give too much away at this point.
Oh, no, that's definitely the best one. It's the one I wanted. Not competitive.
Okay, so we've taken our sides and let's set the scene. So buying versus renting is something that gets talked about generally all the time, whether you're a property investor or not. In the UK, historically, buying is a really big deal. It's seen as the best. But elsewhere in Europe, it's completely the opposite. So loads to talk about just in general. But for property investors, there's even more to consider. There's more layers to this. So we wanted to address this because this is something that we hear in our community all the time. It's such a typical scenario that we see on the forum, that people email us about. We hear it when we're at meetups. It's people who are starting out in property, relatively new to it, and they just don't know whether they should buy their own home or not. Okay, so to make this a fair fight, we're going to take a pretty typical scenario and we're going to use this as the basis for our arguments. So here's a situation. We've got somebody who's been listening to the podcast for about a year, so they've got some knowledge about investing. They've got £50,000 in the bank. They're able to save another £10,000 per year. At the moment, they rent where they live, and they want to know, should they spend that £50,000 that they've got on their own home, or should they start building their buy-to-let portfolio? Rob, does that sound fair to you?
It does, and as they're already renting already, I think we know who's going to win. They can stay where they are. Okay, Rob, we're going to break this down into different categories, or rounds, if you like. I've got my Lucasade ready. I've got my sweatband on. Let's go. Our first category we're going to debate over is getting started. Okay,
so when it comes to getting started, why you should buy, there's a couple of real killer arguments for that. So the first one doesn't apply so much to this situation because this person's got £50,000 in the bank, which is a decent amount of money in order to go and get a buy-to-let property. But if you had a smaller amount of money, then you'd be able to get started sooner if you were buying your own home because you can borrow more. So you can get a mortgage up to about 90% rather than, let's say, about 75% as a buy-to-let. Therefore, you're able to get off the mark and acquire some kind of property quicker than you otherwise would be able to because you don't need so much in the bank. Like I said, though, that's not so important for this scenario because we've got 50,000. But there's another absolute killer here. That is, once you own your own home, you've got far greater access to mortgages. So at the moment, if you don't own any property at all, you don't own your own home, you don't own any investment properties, in that situation, which is the situation we're talking about here, there's only 2 or 3 lenders who will even consider lending you any money. That means if you want to go ahead and get a buy-to-let, to start with, it's going to be pretty difficult. You won't be able to get rates as attractive if you can get a mortgage at all. But also, it means that all your future purchases are going to be similarly tricky because now you've spent that cash, it's going to take longer for you to get that home, which means until you do that, you're going to be stuck with uncompetitive rates. You're not going to have a very limited choice of lender. And if the market dries up, you might end up in a position, which we have had before, where you can't get any kind of mortgage at all. So while you want to invest in buy-to-let property and buying your own home might seem like a step back, it's actually, in the long term, speeding things up. It's giving you a far better platform to invest from.
How many mortgages do you need, Rob? You only need one. So there may be 2 or 3, but you only need one of them to go through for the first one. And then there are more, so yes, it's still a bit restricted, but there's plenty more second time around. So I'm not having that, Rob. You can still get going, and there's major lenders currently like NatWest of that small pool that'll do it. So the rates aren't that uncompetitive. And if you're buying your own home, yes, it is a smaller deposit. But if you're in the southeast, that 50 grand, you're not going to have any change left to get going afterwards. That's going to be completely swallowed up. Whereas 50 grand buy-to-let, well, if you're up in the north and you're buying in places like Manchester or Liverpool, you'll certainly get one. You'll have change, savings close to getting a second, or you might be able to even squeeze a second property out. So straight away, you've got a couple of properties in your portfolio. So Rob, that's my comeback on round 1. We'll let the audience score this one. Let's go on to round 2, which is capital growth.
Okay, capital growth. There's another couple of huge advantages for buying here. The big one is leverage. So like I said earlier, when it comes to your own home, you're able to borrow upwards of 90%. That means you're able to leverage your money further. So with that 50 grand that you've got, let's forget about stamp duty and things like that for now to keep it simple. And let's say that you are able to magnify that 10 times with leverage. So you're able to buy property worth £500,000. That means that you own a higher value of property than you'd get from buy-to-let. Therefore, if property prices increase by 5%, then in pounds and pence terms, you're going to have more growth than if you owned a smaller amount of property because you're not able to leverage it so far. So straight away, all else being equal, you've got more capital growth from buying. But it goes deeper than that. Chances are the area that you choose to live in is going to be a desirable area. There are some areas that work really well for rental properties, but there are others that tend to be dominated by owner-occupiers. Chances are they're the type of area that you're going to target for your own home. And capital growth tends to be stronger in those areas because they're in demand. That growth happens earlier in the cycle and it's stronger. So you're going to get more growth for 2 reasons, which you can then reinvest into your own portfolio. So again, it gets you off the mark faster and is going to give you more growth, not just in the long term, but in the shorter term as well, which you can then reinvest into your portfolio to get you further faster.
Nice couple of jabs, Rob, but I've got a hook of a punch coming here. What are the chances of that area that you're going to live in being the best place to invest in the country for capital growth? Now, if you buying a desirable area, yeah, hopefully you will get that capital growth. But you're not buying for that reason. You're buying because it's close to those shops you like, or that coffee shop that you love, or that really good school that you must be near. Is that little pocket of the country going to be the best place to invest? You are pod committed to that area, whereas the rest of the UK, if you invest, is open to you. And there are areas that are flying right now where are probably not where you're choosing to live. So having the whole of the UK open to you as an investment choice, if you're after capital growth and that's your investment strategy, you can certainly find it. And if that's what you aim for, then you're going to have to be a pretty rubbish investor not to beat somebody who's restricted to one little pocket of the country.
I want to come back on that, but no, we're going to keep this fair. We're going to let the listeners decide who wins round 2, and we're going to move on to round 3. Not going to lie, a little bit nervous about this one. Round 3 is cash flow. Take it away, Rob.
Well, I'm feeling brave, so I'm going to head off on this one. Cash flow, so simple this one. It's all for camp rent. You don't have to put that lumpy deposit in at the beginning because you're going to be investing that elsewhere. You don't have to pay maintenance. There's no maintenance costs because your landlord's going to look after that for you. So washing machine breaks? Fab. Landlord's going to buy one. Insurance for the property? Not your concern. Service charges? Don't worry about that, my friend. Renting, it's just you pay your rent. Yeah, you got to pay your normal bills, but so you've got to pay those if you own your place as well. Plus the big one, yes, you haven't got those day-to-day running costs, but the big one is when you invest that money, that 50,000, you're going to be making a cash flow. You're going to be making a return. Whether you go for a capital growth strategy or not, you're going to be making a surplus every single month. So you're going to have money rolling into your account month in, month out, not the other way when you buy it, when it's rolling out, where you've got to keep upgrading the property, spending more money on it. It just absorbs that money. It's like a sponge taking money from you month after month. Whereas if you use that money to invest, yes, you're getting a capital growth like your own home, which we discussed, but you're also getting that income too. Seems like a no-brainer to me. They say cash flow is king, and I think renting is king for cash flow.
Well, that's why I was nervous about this round, because I can't dress up the fact that when you're buying a rental property, yeah, you've got income, and if you've got a property, you haven't. But I think there's more to this than first meets the eye. First of all, Rob, you mentioned having to spend money on improvements. Well, if you're making improvements, that will increase the value of the property, so you'll get more capital growth and you can take out that equity later. Whereas when you're renting, you either can't make any improvements, or if you do, then you move out and it's gone. The landlord's had all the benefit. But let's take this back to cash flow. If you buy, at the moment, because mortgages are so cheap, it's a lot cheaper than renting. So if you bought a buy-to-let, you might have, for the sake of argument, £300 of rental profit coming in every month. But if you bought your own home, you might be saving £300 over your rental costs. Therefore, in cash flow terms, at the end of the month, you're actually no worse off, and you've got all the benefits that I've been talking about in the previous rounds. Not only that, but if you go for a fixed rate mortgage for, say, 5 years, even 10 years, which you can get on residential, your living costs are fixed. Therefore, anything that you can save up every month in addition to those costs, you know that you can put towards investing. If you're renting, then if rents go up, then great. As an investor, that's good news for you. But your own costs are going up as well. So you're spending more money now, and you might be spending even more money in the future. So your cash flow is not actually as peachy as it first appears.
Oh man, I want to carry on fighting in that round, but the bell has gone, time is up, so it's next round, and we're into lifestyle. Rob, get ready, because I'm coming out swinging. Lifestyle. Okay, simple. If you want the lifestyle, if you want that flexibility, you want that freedom, rent. You can move. So love where you're living now, but things change for you? Fancy a change? Just rent somewhere else. Pretty simple. You can even get places that are furnished, so you don't even have to bother with all that furniture moving. Want to move home? Well, you got all your furniture to lug out and lug into the new place. All the costs involved. Oh gosh, stamp duty again. No thank you. You want to rent? You want that flexibility? You want that freedom to just live where you fancy year by year? Or even on some contracts, month by month, you can have that level of flexibility now. The renting option is the no-brainer. The world is your oyster when you choose to rent.
You make it sound so glamorous, Rob, but is it really? Do you really want to be living under the threat of getting 2 months' notice at any time? Yes, there are great things about being flexible and trying out different places and being mobile, but there's massive downsides as well. What if you're renting somewhere near to your kid's school, then either the rent goes up and you can't afford it, or the landlord tells you that you have to move on and you can't find anywhere else anywhere near. Suddenly you've got to take your kids out of school, or you've got a massive journey every morning, and all because you made the decision to rent instead of buying. And you mentioned properties being furnished. Well, great, but do you really want to be living with someone else's furniture? Chances are it's got chips in it and it's a bit broken from the previous tenants. You can't have your own stuff because you know you might have to move it in 6 months. You can't even put your own pictures up on the walls. I think when it comes to lifestyle, there's a lot more to stability than you were letting on there. Okay, I think some blood has been drawn. We're both getting a little bit wobbly on our feet now. Luckily, the final round is in sight. So here we go. Final round, mindset and the emotional side. And I'll go first on this one and just put you out of your misery because it's absolutely no contest. It's just such an instinctive human drive to have a place of your own. Knowing that you've got somewhere stable, not just for the practicalities that I've just been talking about, but for the emotional side as well. It's no fun knowing that you might have to move on at any time. It's no fun having to get permission to do things or rely on a landlord to fix things for you. You've got a place, it's yours forever, you can raise a family there, and you know that nothing's going to happen to change that. If you're renting, you're just paying off someone else's mortgage. If you've got your own place, you're paying off your own mortgage. It's going to be yours one day, you're going to have it free and clear, you can live there in retirement. So if you take money out of it completely and you look at the emotional side, which I think is really important, because yeah, the financial side is important, but this is about your home, it doesn't get much more important than that. So when it comes to the emotional side, it's so clearly in favour of buying, it's just not even fair.
Oh, Rob. Such a dated mindset. And that's the word mindset, isn't it? It's just that space between your ears. And you just need a modern mindset. Look at Europe. Europe, they're used to renting. They're used to doing it that way. Long-term rents are just the norm. It's not a universal mindset. It's a British mindset. It's one that's dated and it's changing. When you have to look at the trend figures, more and more people are renting. But fortunately, rental laws, and I think this is a good thing whether you're an investor or you're just renting, is that rental laws are being changed to really benefit tenants who want that long-term security, who want a good property to live in. The rental market is really being looked after by the government now. Yes, many years ago people wanted to own their own homes, and some still do today, but the tide is turning, my friend. We're going to the European model, and renting offers so many benefits that people just don't feel the need to own anymore. Wowza, Rob. Right, if we weren't recording this in separate rooms, I think we should hug it out after that, because that was brutal. Two strong debates for buying and for renting. But now the gloves are off, the fight's over, and we're at the post-match press conference and we're all friends again. Should we actually give our real thoughts on this?
And I'm actually glad that I won the coin toss and got to take the buy side of things, because it challenged my own thinking as well. Because of the lifestyle factors and the flexibility that you talked about, I've always been pro-renting. I rented for a long time. I like the idea of my money working for me, and I felt that having a load of money tied up in a home that wasn't producing any income, to me that seemed like a bit of a waste. So that was my own view because of my own circumstances. But doing this challenged me to look at the other side of things as well. I think I always underestimated the kind of the mindset and the emotional piece when it came to buying. And I think that is a really important factor. When it comes to where you live, you can't just look at it purely in financial terms. You have to bring that side into it. And when you combine that with the fact that it makes mortgages so much easier, I don't think you can take the view, which I probably would have done a few years ago, that there's no point to buying, that it's just a waste of money and you should invest instead. I think there is a strong case for it.
Absolutely. And I think the thing this comes down to most is it depends on where you are in life right now and ultimately your goals. What do you want to achieve? There is no right answer for everybody, and that's why we tried to bring a bit of a scenario into play, because you could have a completely different scenario where buying is the absolutely right thing to do and renting is not. And I think my own situation really echoes that, because I rented for a while when I moved to London in the southeast because I didn't know where I wanted to live. It suited my lifestyle. I wanted to try out different areas. Really enjoyed that. Really enjoyed the flexibility. But not so long ago, bought my own home because of where I am in life now. Got a couple of kids, wanted to settle down, don't feel the need to move as much, certainly don't get to go out as much as I used to. So my own circumstances changed, and so therefore my strategy did. So what's the right strategy for a person in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, their 60s? It could change each time and depending on their goals. So while I think it's really important to battle it out, if you ever end up battling this out with anybody or having your own internal debate, make sure you get clear on where do you want to get to? Because once you understand what your goals are and what you want to achieve, it quite often makes the path clearer on what you should do.
Okay, so we got a bit fractious at times on our main topic. Let's make sure we're feeling the love again, and let's have a 5-star review left from a kind listener. So Rob, who's been generous enough to leave us a review this week?
Oh, we're feeling the love in the reviews, Rob. So thank you so much to these wonderful hubbers. First up, Nathan. Thanks so much, guys. Your podcasts are amazing and have really helped me get on track to saving up my first buy-to-let. With my child on the way, you both have really helped me set up his future. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Nathan. And Molly says, Rob and Rob cater for the beginner to the experienced investor. They cover many of the different aspects of property investing, including answering all questions from listeners. The podcast is just the start, though. This is the gateway to numerous fantastic resources to make your life easier. Fundamental books, meetups, and a great online forum. Thank you, Robs. Well, thank you, Nathan, and thank you, Molly.
Right, resource of the week time, and just in case we weren't feeling warm and fuzzy again, this week we're acknowledging a couple of resources from the past that each of us recommended, but then we were talking about it the other day, and the other one of us has recently discovered it and really enjoyed it as well. So it seemed like a good reason to dig these out again, because clearly they've stood the test of time and we've both really enjoyed them. So the first one, Rob, is a book that I read and recommended quite a long time ago now, but you've just read it recently. It's Open by Andre Agassi.
Oh, Rob, I can't believe it took me so long to get to this book. Now I know how good it is. What a fantastic book. Open by Andre Agassi. It's an incredible story. You think, okay, guy played tennis, won a lot of titles, retired. There's so much more to it. I remember you saying, Rob, what made it really interesting, or one of the things that made it really interesting, is the fact that he hates tennis. Like, who would have knew? Like, a guy that successful in that discipline hated the game. It's a really good book. Really talks about mindset. So as a property investor, mindset is so important. So the book covers how Andre went from being a whiz kid, dominating the world of tennis, going into a huge slump where he dropped dramatically in the rankings and became a bit of a nobody on the tennis front, and then surging back to end his career on a high. Absolutely brilliant book. I've not given anything away that'll diminish the enjoyment of this. I tackled this through Audible, so an audio book. It was really good, really enjoyed it, but I'm sure a print copy will be just as good. Highly recommended, and I think well worth mentioning again on the podcast. And yours, Rob, is a podcast that I love, still do love, and I've kind of pushed you back to having a look at it again.
Yeah, you were really insistent about this one. And we agree on a lot of stuff. We like a lot of the same things. When we disagree, that's cool. It's not a big deal. But occasionally there's something that one of us will really just keep on pushing. And you were like this with Masters of Scale. It's a podcast presented by Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, among other things. I listened to this when it first came out and I really didn't enjoy it. It sounds a bit superficial, but there were all these sound effects all over it that made it seem a bit childish, and I just couldn't get into it. And I told you this, and you just wouldn't let it go. You just kept on mentioning it again and again and telling me about all these great episodes. Like, oh, fine, all right, I'll listen to it. And lo and behold, once you get beneath the surface of how it's presented, there's some fantastic episodes and there's some great lessons in here. One that I just listened to today was all about online communities and social media with Katerina Fake, who co-founded Flickr, which you've probably heard of, and is also an investor in Etsy and Kickstarter, which you've definitely heard of. She had some really great insights into what it takes to build an online community, which is what we're doing with the Property Hub. So that was a great listen. So I'm very glad you coaxed me back into that one, and I'll be going back through some of the episodes that I missed as well.
Well, I'm glad you enjoy it, Rob. And yes, podcasts with those silly sound effects should be avoided. Okay, Rob. Well, before we overdo it on the cheese, let's talk about next week's podcast, because it's really, really important that people listen to this one, because it could be the difference between you wasting thousands of pounds or possibly making thousands of pounds. I think the subject matter is that important.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about property courses. It is really important because it's such an important topic in our industry. It's something that we get asked about all the time, and with good reason. There's a lot at stake. So we're going to be getting into that in depth next week. And before that, we're going to be back with Ask Rob and Rob on Tuesday. So enjoy the meetups tonight if you're getting along to one, and we'll see you back here for the podcast very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Property Podcast. For show notes, all our past episodes, and to leave a review, go to thepropertyhub.net/podcast.